All right, everybody, hello and welcome to our season preview series and the reserve team. As always, I'm your host, Shaun, and as we have been for the last few weeks, we're going to be covering off each of the A-League sides in the build-up to the start of the A-League season. Now, at time of recording and at time of release, we're within 1 week of the season starting. There has been some news today. We'll talk about it throughout the course of this episode that may put the start of the league in jeopardy, but we will cover all that content as best we can in today's episode. We are, of course, we've done Sydney FC before, but we're heading to the other side of the end, or other end of the city and the western suburbs and the Parramatta area. Thankfully, it's not just my biased Melbourne opinion that you guys are going to have to listen to today. We've brought in two fantastic experts. First up, making his debut on the channel, it's probably the hardest working Twitch streamer in the Australian Football Manager community. You can also find his dulcet tones commentating NPL fixtures around the New South Wales area. It's Will. Will, thanks so much for joining us, mate.
Thank you, Shaun. Thank you for that lovely introduction. You flatter me.
Mate, I practiced it for a week before we had this recording. As soon as you were booked and locked in, I was like, I've got to blow him up a little bit for everybody else. And also joining us from the Ladies League and from the reserveteam.com.au, the meme queen herself. And I don't think she knows this one, but she is the first person to actually appear on the channel that's been inducted into the Reserve Team Hall of Fame. So welcome, Chrissy, for finally joining us on the channel.
Thank you for having me on, and I'm in the Hall of Fame already.
Yeah, I've got to do a tweet about it to let you know. But yeah, you went in last week. So technically, Michelle nominated you for Chrissy Memes, but it was a landslide victory. Your fans came out in force, and I think it was like one of the bigger winning margins we've seen so far. So congratulations, and thank you for being the first inductee to actually appear on the channel. That's great.
Awesome, what a wonderful Christmas present.
I know. It's the best thing that really any of us could have hoped for. I was hoping it would be me. I'm sure Will deep down is hoping he'll get in one day, but you're the first one. So worthy honour. Of course, we are going to go through quite a bit of stuff with the Western Sydney Wanderers. Before we go into that, I'm going to jump in and give a quick history and background update. This is mainly for people that might be watching from overseas or from different areas of Australia that may not have followed the league when Western Sydney came into the fold. So I'll quickly run through that. But while I'm doing that, I'd like for you two guys to kind of think about some of your earliest or perhaps even fondest memories of Western Sydney Wanderers. They've had some great victories during their time. They've had some crushing defeats. You guys can think through all of that stuff, and I'll come back to you in a moment with a few of those. But for those of you not aware, in 2012, the A-League and FFA was in a difficult space, having North Queensland Fury fold and revoking Gold Coast United's licence in the previous 12 months. Two failed expansion bids in a short space of time really meant that they had to get the next team joining the league absolutely correct and spot on. Desperate to find a new area for football to thrive, FFA CEO at the time, Ben Buckley, announced a new Sydney club was going to be determined to join in that region and create a second Sydney derby. Many in the New South Wales and Sydney football communities called out for a Western Sydney-based side, including national team players Scott Chipperfield, Tim Cahill and Lucas Neal. Initial funding in that area and commercial backing for the team did prove quite difficult, with previous investors of the old NSL era and Parramatta Power and strong sides in the region of that time not necessarily interested in the direction the A-League was heading. With the FFA initially owning and operating the bid and the club and financial backing from the Australian government to help support a club in the region, the local football community was immediately engaged with the product, and fan forums were held in Mount Pritchard, Parramatta, Rooty Hill, Penrith, Castle Hill, Campbelltown and Bankstown, where fans for the first time were given the opportunity to discuss a club's values, culture, playing style, colours, base and branding before a signing had been announced or a ball been kicked in trainings or in games. The inaugural season following on was a large success, with fans flocking to Parramatta to watch the team play, and despite a slow start in the league, 10 straight wins in the latter half of the season saw the club leap to the top of the league and win their first premiership in their inaugural season. The red and black block revolutionised some of the things relating to active support in the league, something that we hadn't really seen offered in the early part of the season. And players like Shinji Ono lit the league up on a playing pitch, and youngsters like Aaron Moy, who I will gush over as long as you guys will allow me to do it this afternoon, getting their first real opportunities to play in the league. Western Sydney completed arguably their greatest achievement in 2014, riding a wave of strong away performances and a tremendous defensive record under Tony Popovic to the Asian Champions League final, where they defeated Al Hilal 1-0 over two legs in a spiteful encounter where we met quite a few different people around soccer Twitter that changed the way that we look at the game internationally, and becoming the only side to win the Asian Champions League from within Australia. In addition to that performance, they've been league runners-up twice in the 2013-2014 season, 2015-2016, and, sorry to bring this one up, guys, but 3 times grand final runners-up, 2013, 2011, and 2016. So, even though that's a short period of time, you guys actually are quite fortunate that you've got a whole big depth of history. I didn't have to go into like playing rosters or anything like that. I didn't have to talk too much about who owns the club. You've got trophies that we can talk about, and you've got fantastic performances throughout that time, even though you are one of the younger teams still in the division. Chrissy, I'll go to you first. What are some of your earliest or fondest memories of the Wanderers?
Oh, I have to say one of the earliest memories was, of course, hearing about the team coming to the A-League. But one of my fondest memories was when I was 14 years old and I actually stuck into the RBB for the first time. So, second half of the match, because of course the first half there's no way in hell you're allowed in unless you had an active support pass. But I found my way in. I'm not gonna tell anybody how I found my way in because I might get in trouble. But that's one of my fondest memories, being 14 and experiencing the RBB for the first time.
Yeah, and they haven't been able to get rid of you since. So you're part of the woodwork now, which is absolutely fantastic to see. Same question as well for yourself, Will. What were some of your earliest or fondest memories for the team from Western Sydney?
Yeah, I think my first memory was the first game against Central Coast at home. It ended in a 0 draw, so it wasn't the most amazing way to start. But I just remember looking at the RBB and just being absolutely like amazed because I'd never seen anything like that before. I hadn't been to a lot of Australian football games, and just seeing that energy and seeing that passion, I just knew that okay, this is something that I eventually want to be a part of. And then fast forward a few years later, like Chrissy, second half when the security guards are a bit lenient, shall I say, finding my way into I think Sydney away at Moore Park or something like that, getting through the general admission section. Very, very fun. And yeah, ever since then, I've just never looked back. And it's been a very, very fun time in there.
Yeah, fantastic to hear. We've got two of the more chaotic members. And I forgot to mention all the Pyromaster stuff in the intros, but we'll definitely come back to that as we get through it. I think one of the big things that we call out there, and this is probably the benefit that Western Sydney's had, is that they've learnt a lot of the lessons that we know now from North Queensland Fury and Gold Coast United, and even selfishly as a Foundation Melbourne Heart member, things that we didn't do well that Western Sydney Wanderers did fantastically in terms of engaging the local community. It really was from the first kick of a ball in the A-League season that they had that passionate support, and that the Western Sydney region had a team that they were proud to call their own, which is fantastic to see. Like you can see, you've got behind you over your shoulder there, Chrissy, I think that's the inaugural kit or one of the early kits, like, you know, stuff like that. It just immediately resonated, and you can wander around Sydney and find red and black shirts at any time of the year, let alone inside the A-League season. Sorry, Chrissy, what were you going to add?
It's actually last year's kit. Or actually, the year before, it was the kit with the year that Ori Orieta played for us, and we were still stuck at, of course, Park. But I do have the inaugural kit somewhere in my cupboard, so I should have brought that one out. But I had to put this one up because Rosa bought this for me as a present, so I need to put it up there.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll give our shout out to the Overlord because we all want to get our unpaid internships renewed for next season, so we give her praise whenever we can. The last 5 finishes and last season's results in the A-League. In 2015-2016, second place and a runners-up finish in the grand final. In 2016-2017, 6th place and an elimination final defeat. 2017-2018, a 7th place finish. 2018-2019, an 8th place finish. And 2019-2020, a 9th place finish. For a club the size of Western Sydney Wanderers, not making finals for 3 consecutive seasons, a little bit painful, but don't stress. I was a Melbourne Heart fan for a long time. I know what it's like to not be in that conversation. Will, I'll go to you first this time. Of the 2019-2020 season, which felt like it went for about 2.5 years once we got out of lockdown and eventually finished it, what were some of your highlights or some of the silver linings that you saw from a Wanderers perspective?
I think a lot of Wanderers fans would say there's definitely the derbies. I think having that little moment of positivity in a season where things just didn't seem to click was really, really good to have. I think for me, if I had to pick, I'd probably pick the first one because I think at that point in time, once we won that first derby, I think it was in round 3, like there was so much optimism. I think everyone was thinking, oh, we're riding high off this. We're going to keep moving forward and we're going to make our march into the top 4. And then I guess from that point on, things didn't really go our way and things kind of unraveled to the point that we end up finishing 9th. But I think that was definitely the silver lining for me.
Yeah, perfect. And same for yourself, Chrissy. Any highlights out of the 2019-2020 season?
I have to go for the derbies too, but my favourite derby was definitely the second one at Cogra. And I have to say it's probably mainly because it was my brother's birthday and that was his birthday gift. To have the game sort of edge off and be so competitive and, you know, midway. I think the horrible side of it was how the fans were treated by the SWAT police, and that's why it was such a downer at the beginning of the game. But then to have Mitchell Duke, of course, score that goal and end up winning the match, it was probably the best birthday present I could have ever given to him, but also a perfect way to finish such a tough night. And the experience in the stands wasn't the best, but the experience on the field was really good.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things. Like, I remember the early Heart days, we were always terrible, but we always had that one kind of Christmas derby, which would be the one that we put up a fight in. And it's amazing the way that even when you have a poor season, you can still look back so fondly on those derby results and see how much that they've brought to the season or how much they've brought to the overall quality of your year just by getting that victory and getting bragging rights in your own city. And I think one of the big things, and we might touch upon it further as this podcast kind of continues, is that Western Sydney coming into the league is really galvanised Sydney FC quite a bit as well, and I think galvanised the league in that we actually now have, you know, proper playing history and rivalries, and we remember back to derbies 3 and 4 and 5 years ago because we've got, you know, that real running kind of feeling within the league, and it felt in the early parts of the seasons, and I'm not sure what your experience was previous to Western Sydney joining, that a lot of that did feel manufactured, and a lot of it did feel like stuff that Fox Sports was running with, and now we actually kind of have that natural fan base rivalry, and we know what fixtures we're going to pick out of the list when they get released every week or every year, even though this year it was about 20 minutes before the season started, it felt like. We are going to jump into the stadium. You guys have had some short-term pain having to travel to places like Spotless, Homebush, a variety of different areas. I know it sucked for a lot of people, and there was a lot of very negative feedback about how that was handled. However, surely now at this point, you guys kind of look back and think it was all worth it, because Bankwest, I think, is the premier stadium in the division itself, pioneering safe standing in Australia. It's perfect shape. It looks like a great viewing experience from playing capacity. The one downside is that, of course, lockdown in the past 12 months probably stopped you guys getting there as much as everybody would like. But as far as the stadium's concerned, Chrissy, how would you rate the match day experience? How are you enjoying it so far in the first few months?
So of course 9 out of 10. Leave that little 1%, off because they still haven't confirmed about things about safe smoke. So I'm still waiting for that. But so far 9 out of 10. I love the safe standing and I love how steep the stadium is. Rose has commented on it a bunch of times while she's been sitting, and I have been in a safe standing, of course. But she said she can see every single aspect of the stadium, not just the field, with how steep the seating is. And that's the great thing about the European style of the stadium. You can't miss a single thing from any angle.
Yeah, we've talked about stadiums at length and like our hatred for oval shapes and all that sort of stuff. But I think one of the things that we haven't really got in the league, and I think Cooper's has probably been the main one, and now obviously Bankwest has joined that, a level where it doesn't just feel like a rectangular stadium even, it feels like a football specific stadium with the way that the tiered seating stands, and the angles are really there and designed to get you to capture as much of the game as humanly possible. And then I think the other thing which is fantastic, which we're kind of probably going to see the results of in the next 12 months, is that we know that they're waiting to figure out how to redo the members end at Cooper Stadium. We know that they're waiting to try and figure out how they're going to redo the shed at HBF Park for Perth Glory. Hopefully one day Melbourne City will splash the cash and build us a stadium, but we're all kind of waiting to see how safe standing works out, and hopefully this is kind of the first domino and it works out really successfully so that we get it more around the country. And I think, like Will, you mentioned briefly in your intro, your fondest memories, like that match day experience, that's really the thing that separates football from the rest of the codes in Australia and the rest of the sporting experiences here. And if we can get that right, like, it's going to be huge for the league. But Will, same question to you. What are your thoughts on the stadium initially? How are you enjoying it so far?
Yeah, same as Chrissy. It's great from an active support point of view. It's great if you're sitting in the non-active section as well. It's really steep. All that stuff's kind of been said already. But I think one thing that kind of goes under the radar with Bankwest is like how much space there is in the concourse. If you go out there, like you don't feel crowded at all. And I guess Parramatta was kind of like that because obviously they don't really plan for so many people in the active area. But now that there's like actual space, you can go out there. You don't feel like you're kind of crammed in. And also, like, the safe standing allows you to kind of spread out as well if you want to, but most people just end up cramming in anyway. But I think, overall it's really good. I think, obviously, access to it's going to be good as well once the light rail at Parramatta gets finished. I think we'll see a lot more people coming in as well.
It's that old, if you build it, they will come mentality, and people are still getting there, which is fantastic to see. Now, the other one that we're going to jump in, and we have to acknowledge our bias here because we're obviously all about Kappa at the moment. The TLL kits are fantastic, and if I had one fresh out of the wash, I'd be wearing it right now. But moving to Kappa this season, they have gone with a pretty strong 3 offering. We ranked them pretty highly in our recent A-League kit review. The home kit, fantastic, looks absolutely sharp. It's got a collar this year, that gets bonus points for me. The away kit, an all-white version, which is very popular in the league at the moment, and then the black and gold kit, which they announced a couple of weeks ago. Will, I'll go to you first on this one. What are your thoughts on the kit offerings and making the jump over to Kappa this season?
I think the kits are great. I think they've been pretty polarizing. The response I've seen is that people either really like them, they really like the collars, or they don't like the collars. But I'm personally, like yourself, a big fan of the collars. I'm actually really glad they brought back the white away kit. We didn't have it last year, and I think throwing back to the whole, like, the members choosing the colors thing at the start of the club's history, having that white is really, I think it's been really good to acknowledge, like, the past, and moving the black and gold to a third kit, I think was a good choice. And the designs are great as well.
Yeah, I think the black and gold kit, it'll be interesting to see how that one actually looks on the pitch. Like, they had, was it last year that they had the gold and black version where it was primary gold? That was one of those weird kits where it looks better with a pair of jeans than it actually looked on the pitch, which is fine. That's all right to do, but like it's always weird to kind of see those third kits coming out when we don't play that many like kit clash games throughout the course of a year. Chrissy, obviously gushing over their Ladies League kits at the moment, and you've had fantastic experiences working with them as a supplier. How are you feeling about their offering for Western Sydney this year?
I'm really happy to see Kappa as our new our kit sponsors and suppliers. It's just so good to see Kappa again. That brand was around when I was a kid constantly. I'd see it everywhere. And it just reminds you of your roots of football, your childhood of football, the culture, like that ethnic culture vibe that you grew up with. So to see a club like Western Sydney that represents the West and the working class, to have that sort of brand with their kit, it just makes you feel closer to home once again. So it's another tick on the box and another step closer to cementing our spot within the Western suburbs and really showing the rest of the league who we really are.
Yeah, and you've got to give a shout out to like the Kappa tracksuits. Even if you didn't come from an ethnic family, any 90s kid at one point or another had the matching tracksuit pants and jacket. That was like a rite of passage. I think 90% of the ones were like dodgy ones that people had gotten from like markets and things like that weren't necessarily 100% Kappa. But I've got to give Kappa a ton of credit as well. They were a Melbourne Heart supplier back in the day, and Adelaide United and a few other teams, and they gave us kind of like template kits with just our colour palette on it. And I remember this one year where they had like these turtleneck kits in the middle of summer, and it was an absolute nightmare. So fantastic to see that they're actually starting to do more like cultivated kit offerings for the clubs. And I think they're starting to see the benefits as we mature as a league of offering out things specific to a playing group and specific to a club. We're getting away from those template kits, which is fantastic for all of our clubs across the division. And yeah, Cap has done, I think, a fantastic job. It would not shock me to see a sea of those white collars, Will, throughout the round 1 and round 2 fixtures in Western Sydney, should they go ahead, fingers and toes crossed. But fantastic to see positive responses from you guys as well. Now, we are going to jump into the playing group stuff. Now, this is usually the part that kind of goes for the longest, so by all means, feel free to riff, feel free to go off on any tangents that you guys want to go off. There is a tremendous amount to cover through as well, so by all means, feel free to take your time with any of the players that you want to talk about. We'll start first with the players out. Departures include Matt German, who's moved to Popovic's Greek Revolution at Xanthi, Mitch Duke at Al Tawoon, Permin Schwegler has actually retired and I think returned to Switzerland. Nick Suman has jumped across to Newside MacArthur. Radi Majeski has moved to Wistar Krakow, back in his home Poland after recovering from injury last year. Mateo Cordier is released according to the A-League website, but his Wikipedia still says that he's a Western Sydney player, so we'll figure out exactly what that means in the next couple of minutes. Nick Sullivan has made the jump across to Perth Glory, and Daniel Lopa, unfortunately, as recently as last week, released from his contract to return to Europe to be closer to his family. Obviously, quite a few players in there, some big names from your lineup last season. Chrissy, is there anyone that jumps out at you from that list that you think is perhaps the biggest departure or the person that you're going to have the biggest difficulty replacing this off-season?
Daniel Lopa. He's a goalkeeper that we relied so heavily on at the beginning of the season with his introduction video. A lot of people took the piss out of him and said, what's this that you're introducing us to? This video doesn't even look like it's enough to convince us that we have a steady goalkeeper that's better than Vedran. Then he came over and he, of course, proved us all wrong, and he became the shining light of the starting 11. If we didn't have him on the starting 11 or if he was injured, it scared the living hell out of us. We weren't sure what we were going to do because we weren't confident in our defence. To see him disappear after losing our key strikers as well as a few midfields like Majewski, he was definitely one of the midfielders that we wanted to stay on the squad, but never got a chance to due to injury, and then of course not getting his shot with the staff not wanting him to be part of the squad. So of course he had to go back to Holland. So the rest of our defence, midfield, and attacking it was shaky, and he was the only shining light that kept us going throughout the game. So this season, seeing him go as well, I'm not confident without a goalkeeper such as him on our squad.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because, like, the part that I think it's very easy to forget, and my background and Will's background probably a bit as well as Football Manager, where we kind of forget the human aspect of it. It's a tricky one because we've seen a lot of European players want to return to be closer to home. Like, I think I had to draw the parallel, but Ola Toivonen at Victory was happy at the start of last season to say, I'm happy to raise my kids here, I love it in Melbourne, I want to stay. But then I think once they had to deal with the reality of potentially being locked in and out of countries, we saw a lot of different players, starting to want to move back closer to home. And I think we've seen that across the divisions, not specific to to Western Sydney itself. The interesting part about Lopar, and the part that didn't quite make 100% sense to me, is that he came back and started preseason, and then it was during that preseason period that he actually got released from his contract. So I'm not sure what that detail is. Maybe it'll come to the fore. Hindsight is usually 2020 with those ones. I'll ask you the same question, Will. Anyone that jumps out of you at that list that you think is going to be difficult to replace this year, or that you think offered quite a bit to the side last year?
Yeah, I agree with Chrissy. I think Lopar was a massive miss. I think once you set down on like who your starting goalkeeper is and you have a good one, it just is like a rock at the back that you don't need to worry about for years. We saw that when we had Kovic, just having him always there as that steady presence. I guess to talk about maybe someone else, I think Duke is going to be a massive miss, if not for the goals he provided, but for the passion and the leadership he displayed last season in a team that kind of looked a bit lackluster in that department at times. I think part of what made the Wanderers so good in those early seasons was having a team that had like a very clear identity. And I think Duke kind of provided a lot of that for us, and not having him leaves, I guess, a big hole in the leadership department of the team, with a bunch of youngsters coming through as well that probably need someone like that.
Yeah, I mean, like, even the worst, like, even when you are a team that's having a bad season or having an off year, you want to at least have players that look like they give a shit. And he looked like he cared all the way through. Like, he had a whole bunch of impassioned speeches at the end of matches. I think he did quite a bit to try and re-engage a community that was perhaps I'm not going to say falling out of love, that's too harsh, but obviously wasn't enjoying the season and wasn't enjoying the playing performances. And his quality, because we know he's been quality in this division before. He's immediately gone to, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, by all means, savage me in the comment section below, but Al Tawoon, and scored goals for them, scored big goals in the Champions League. So he had that quality. There is a part of me that kind of thinks, and I don't want to rag on people that are no longer, in the division, but maybe thinks that some of the players that we're talking about weren't necessarily coached to their best potential, and they weren't necessarily getting that managerial experience to it. Because I also really highly rate Matt German. I think he's a fantastic defender, and I love, like, one of my secret pleasures of football is a left-sided centre-back. I just always think they're great if you can get one for your team. So like the likes of German, Duke and Lopar that you've mentioned, big players, and players that I think could play at the very top of the A-League level. So it was interesting to see, one, them move in different directions, given the off-season that we're having, given that we're figuring out how football's going to look in a post-pandemic world, but then also kind of look at how did they perform last year in that coaching structure, and maybe if they were there, and we'll talk further about the new coaching structure in a few minutes, if they were there and getting a higher quality level of coaching, would they perform to a different level, or would they offer something different to the division above and beyond what they put in last year? But there are some challenges there. There's obviously some gaps in that side. We will come back in a moment and have a look at how they have resolved some of those. But with each of these ones, we kind of ask a big question. And I alluded to it earlier, but for Western Sydney Wanderers, no finals in 3 seasons. That's pretty rough for what is a very big club, one of the bigger clubs in the division. Every side goes through rebuilding phases. I think the tough thing was that during the Babel era, it didn't necessarily feel like the club was consistently taking steps forward. You'd kind of get a good derby win in a spiteful contest and then lose to Newcastle the week after, or something to that effect. What do you think, with the addition of Carl Robinson, what do you think is the biggest task for him to kind of recapture hearts and minds in Western Sydney and return them to former glory and where we would expect them to be, which is, I think, a top 4 side each and every year? Chrissy, I'll let you have the first crack at this one. It's a big question, so by all means, feel free to take your time.
It's going to take a bit, isn't it? I think I'd just go straight to what I think he needs to gain is trust of the fans, because at the moment each manager that we've had has promised us so much, yet they haven't been able to pull through and make sure that promise goes ahead and comes through and gives us the results that we want to see. They do say that we want derby results, so we did get those derby results last season, but the only reason we got those derby results is because of key players like Danny Lopar in the goals, saving us every time we did make a mistake, and Mitchell Duke coming back with the goals and the passion and making sure to keep that alive within, not only on the field with his players, but also making sure that he has the trust of the fans off the field too. So Mitchell Duke was a key player in keeping the passion of the RBB as well. So he was one of the reasons why we were singing for 90 minutes and we refused to stop. Carl Robinson, I think, needs to gain the trust of anybody, the RBB, because they do put their heart and soul into every single match, not just the players. So if you don't have the support of one of the biggest and most respected active supports in the league, then you're not going to get far at all.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think, just touching on the RBB stuff, I think if we go back to like the Gombau era, where the RBB was kind of, I think, and you guys can by all means disagree or correct me if I'm doing the wrong things. Like, I don't think we're at a point in Australia in our sporting culture and the way that we live and the way that we work, where we ever need fans rocking up to training sessions and wanting explanations. Like, I just think that's not the way that we should be carrying ourselves in football, and that's not something that we think we need to bring into the division. But at the moment, like, everything's in place at Western Sydney. The training facilities are fantastic. The membership base, as you already mentioned, is fantastic. The active support is fantastic. That final piece of the puzzle that's just missing is getting that season where you guys start performing at the top end of the division again. And I think everything's there to do that. It's just about getting the appointments right and maybe some of the playing personnel right. And you're so close. It's not missing a whole lot. And there are other sides in the division that have much bigger issues. But I'll go to the same question as well for yourself, Will. What do you think the biggest task is for Carl Robinson? And what do you think he has to do this season to try and get you back up towards the top end of the table?
I think, to be honest, I think it's going to be like balancing, because I think JT and Lederer seem to have asked him to kind of do a lot of things. They've kind of asked him to embrace the youth and develop a lot of young players. We signed Magush, I think they say, Lesiotis and Kankar, all great young players that we wouldn't have signed unless we were serious about youth direction. But at the same time, the club definitely wants to get back to success, hence the moves of Troisi, Abini, and Doran. So I think he's got very, very two different sides to juggle, that being, getting the short-term results, getting the club back to where it needs to be, but also developing this massive crop of young players that, the club has invested a lot in with the facilities. I'm sure Lederer and JT don't want this, state-of-the-art football facility for our youngsters to go to waste and not produce players in the first team. And it's great that we saw a lot of them come through, especially towards the end of the season, when players like Tate Russell got more of a chance in the first team, which I thought was to his benefit. But yeah, I think the problem, and I guess the biggest task for Carl, is going to be balancing a lot of things. We know JT and Lederer are very, very hard people to please. They're happy to pull the trigger on a manager in a very, very short space of time. Case in point, JP. But yeah, I think if he can do that, it's not very easy, but I think if he can do that, he'll be on the right track.
Yeah, and one of the fascinating things, and it's a narrative that doesn't actually impact Western Sydney, one of the few sides, but we're at a point now where a lot of the sides are going into the A-League season with coaches that have gone on like a long coaching journey internally within that club. Selfishly, City is the example. Paddy Kisnorbo has been an A-League coach and then the Youth League manager and then the W League manager, and is now moving from an assistant manager role into a permanent role. We've got a lot of ex-players now playing in the division, the likes of, hate to mention him for you guys, but Steve Corica, Warren Moon at Brisbane, Richie Garcia at Perth, where it makes me feel absolutely ancient to think that players that I used to watch in the league are now going through their managerial careers in the league as well. But clearly I think with Western Sydney, they've gone in a different direction where they either appreciated what Carl Robinson did at Newcastle Jets and looked at it and thought, okay, that's the direction that we want to be heading in, and that's kind of an archetype of how we want to be playing moving forward. So I think they have made the right steps where they've got a clear indication. The same hope that I've got for all those first-year managers or all those managers that are young in their managerial career is for Carl Robinson as well, as you've mentioned, Will, where that if they're going to commit to him for 2 seasons and let him play out the entirety of his contract. Don't sack him during a season because you benefit nothing from it. If at the end of that 2-year contract or whatever his contract length is, they're not happy with the direction, then make the decision in the off-season so that you can bring a coach in who can have a full pre-season training program, who can have a full period. We'll talk about this a little bit further when we get to some of the playing group, because I think we do have to address it, and I'm fascinated to get both of your opinions. But Western Sydney clearly know this year what they want. They went after a coach that was contracted at another team. They've gone after a few players that were contracted at other teams. So they've definitely, I think, got a clear direction about what they're after. They're not just signing people because they're available. They're definitely going after specific things. Not sure if that credit goes to Carl Robinson specifically for knowing what he wants and knowing what he needs in that squad. But it may also go to people like John Tatsmas and whoever else in the backroom staff saying that they are going to back him and go after the people that they need, and they're going to pay out, I think it's compensation fees at the moment, one day, hopefully transfer fees in the division itself. But then the other portion as well that people enjoyed quite a bit, and I think you guys have both mentioned it, and was one of the few, I think, silver linings of last season, is that you've got players coming through your academy that have been Western Sydney fans their entire junior lives. It's crazy to me to think that there are kids that were ball boys that are now playing in the league. That just, again, makes me feel ancient. But some of those players have come through and proven themselves to be really talented players. We'll talk about Costa Grossos, and I'm sure Chrissy's going to gush over him for a little bit. There's a few other players in and around there. I think Mortakudas is a great player. Tate Russell's a great player. And there's quite a few players on scholarship contracts. So they are trying to, I think, balance that first team recruitment, but then also starting to back what they've done with the facilities work and building out that academy structure. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think having players that understand what it means to play for Western Sydney Sydney and understand what it means to be a part of, the RBB and to be from that region and proud of that is going to be huge in kind of restoring their place at the top table as far as the A-League is concerned. But we want them to be doing well. A strong RBB, a strong Western Sydney, a strong experience in Parramatta is, of course, like key and critical to the league's success, and it makes it all the better for it. We're going to jump back into some of our team discussions. We're first going to go into contracted players. So this is players that you've retained from last season. Obviously, quite a few sides have lost players, brought quite a few in. It's always a bit of a merry-go-round, but to their credit, Western Sydney, have kept quite a few of the players from last season, and I've already mentioned there are a whole bunch of players on scholarship contracts as well. Running through that list, and just bear with me because it's a little bit long. Vedran Janjetovic in goal, Dylan McGowan, Patrick Ziegler, Tas Mortakudis, Tate Russell and Daniel Georgievski make up their defensive players carried on from last season. Jordan O'Doherty, Keanu Bacchus, Costa Grosas from midfield, Kwame Yeboah, Simon Cox, Nikolai Mueller and Bruce Kamau as the attacker, and then a bevy of young players available to join. Of those players contracted from last season, it's always key to try and keep a bit of consistency through your squad from year to year to try and help do things like we've spoken about, create that club culture, that identity, understand what it is to be a part of Western Sydney. Is there anyone in that group that you think's expected to really carry the torch this season, or anyone that you expect to maybe be a breakout star for the year ahead? We'll let you have the first crack at this one, mate. Any of that contract extended group that you think is going to be critical to the season ahead?
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. I think a lot of people have kind of touched on this already, but I think this season is definitely kind of like a make or break season for potentially Keanu Bacchus. He's been in the kind of starting midfield fold for the Wanderers for a couple seasons now, and like sometimes he gives us some good games, sometimes not so much. But I think under a coach like Carl Robinson, who's maybe looking to give youth a bit more of a chance, I think this season is going to be really, really important for his development and showing whether or not he can really nail down that starting spot in a midfield, which is going to be very, very competitive to break into with the likes of Troisi and Dorrans. I think other than him, I think something that's been really, really good for us is getting Ziegler back, especially with his switch to being an Australian citizen. Now frees up another visa spot. What we do with that so close to the season, I have no idea. But in the future, if he does decide to stay, it'll be very good. I think having him injury-free, he's struggled with injuries a lot of the time. Having him at the back, hopefully injury-free, hopefully leading, should be a benefit to us as well.
Yeah, it's been fascinating, not just for Western Sydney, but to watch the entire division. Like, the international recruitment this season is very different. I think we're going to have the lowest amount of international and visa players in the league since we were an 8-team competition, which is crazy. And obviously, just one of those things that we're going to figure out with time and probably look back on in hindsight once we get beyond 2020 and the shit fight that's been this year. But I think, the one that you've called out there, Keanu Bacchus, is fascinating because the one thing they haven't done, and future spoilers, I told you guys not to do it, but I'm a hypocrite, so I can. They haven't actually brought in like a defensive midfielder or a proper number 6. So I think that's probably a good sign that Carl Robinson is enjoying the work that he's doing and they're not looking to get too much more depth in that position. So Doherty and Bacchus are really the most defensive central midfielders you have, but clearly I think they might be happy with that. But I'd agree, a big breakout season for him. And then I'd also probably call out Dylan McGowan as well. He was class when he was at Adelaide United, got his move over to Europe, didn't pan out for him, and then kind of came back, and I'm not going to accuse anyone of anything. Hopefully he's a fan of the show. We're not shitting on him in any way, but he did look like he was mainly there for the paycheck last season and not looking to become one of the league's elite level defenders and get back in that Socceroos fold. But Chrissy, same question to you. Contracts extended from last season. Anyone that you would pick out as being a key player for this season, or anything that we might expect, or anyone that we might expect to see have a breakout year or something like that?
I'm really happy that they retained Ziegler as well, and I'm also glad that he's gotten his citizenship. He's off injury, which means this season we're finally, hopefully, going to be seeing him being able to play a full game without any problem. He's going to finally show us what he's capable of. But I'm also very happy that we've kept Nikolai Mueller, because he's spoken highly about the club, spoken highly about the active sport and the whole city as a whole. He has also shown what he can do, and I'm very, very happy to see a couple of those free kicks make their way into the back of the net last season. I'm looking forward to seeing more. So he's a very important player, and I'm happy to see him on board, but I'm also excited to see how he goes with these new signings that have just come in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, he was originally signed as I think, an injury replacement for Majewski, and which brings up an interesting point. I'm desperate to get both of your feedback on it, so I didn't put this on the run sheet. Apologies, it just came to me then. But we saw in the last 12 months Majewski kind of come out and go a little bit after Western Sydney. They paid for him to fly back to Poland to get his treatment so that he could do that in his home country when he was working his way back from his injury. And then he did an interview not long after his contract expired, kind of calling out Dylan McGowan specifically as being the person in the injury and putting the club and the A-League on blast a little bit about how they handled it, which is they paid him for the entirety of his contract. It's not like they tried to sever ties. They paid for his treatment. I'm not sure what more the club could have done, to be fair to Western Sydney. And then we also saw at the same time Marcus Babbel kind of have not complimentary things to say, not necessarily about Western Sydney, but the league itself. It's weird to have two people in that structure and environment kind of turn around and put the boot back in after they've moved on. And I know that can be difficult to not want to try and vent, and obviously huge advocate for venting in terms of mental health and whatever else, but it is weird to see that happen, and maybe that calls out some of the issues that may have been in that dressing room or with that club culture last season. Any thoughts on that, Will? Any seeing players or next staff coming back and talking about the league in a negative light?
I mean, yeah, obviously, it's not a good look for the league and the way we're going to advertise it to overseas players, because it's often the case that when players are looking to come to the league from overseas, they consult like other players that they know. And if someone doesn't have good things to say about the league, then that's obviously going to kind of limit, who we can bring in. But I think, obviously it's not good. The Majewski situation's obviously not ideal. But, if a player wants away from the club, then there's not much that we can do. I think the Babbel one's very interesting because, to be honest, I think it might be a case of maybe Sour Grapes. He didn't get the results that he wanted within the league. And I think a lot of people would agree that he did have a pretty decent squad at his disposal. Definitely a squad that was probably good enough to make the six. But yeah, it's very interesting to see that. It's, obviously, you don't like to hear it, but you just kind of move on to the next season and put that all behind you.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think there is an element of sour grapes to it. Being a great player and having a great playing history doesn't necessarily automatically equate to being a great manager and understanding how to get that level of performance out of your teams. And yeah, we heard about him playing for Liverpool and Bayern Munich and whoever else every time Fox Sports commentators open their mouth. But, it wasn't the greatest brand of football, to be completely honest. But Chrissy, same question to yourself. What were some of your thoughts on the comments made by those players and staff after they left?
Yeah, look, at the beginning of the season, it turned out to be quite well, and I had a lot of faith in both player and manager. And the way that they spoke with so much confidence, they had such a highly rated resume with them as well. So it looked all great, black and white, and on paper. But then halfway through the season, I started to see the cracks in the foundation and the way that Babbel would speak at post-match interviews, as well as with the with young reporters and also reporters who have been in the industry for quite some time. It's like the man had no filter. And at the beginning of the season, of course, that's something that we really, really did like about him, having no filter and having that strong, firm mentality, because I thought that's what the A-League needs, a manager like that to start biting back at people who think that once they've hit the A-League, then that's it. They can go no higher and they're the king of the world. When really, if you hit the A-League and you have that sort of stupid mentality and that sort of attitude, you're not going to survive in Europe. So to see him bite back at players and interviewers going, "You're not going to get into Europe if you act like this," I loved hearing that. Then he started to get a little more aggressive and a little more stupid with the way that he was speaking, and that started to bottle down into, I could see with the squad, everybody started to get quite upset with each other. So the team foundation broke, and that weaseled its way through everything else. So it was upsetting to see that something that we highly looked up to ended up being our downfall.
Yeah, I mean, this is a whole other tangent. I could probably fill 45 minutes of podcast space going on about this, but one of the fascinating things that's kind of becoming more and more apparent is the way that different managers are now, I don't want to say manipulating the media, that's not the right word, but their media handling capabilities and the way that they use that to either paper cracks and issues or, change focus of results and things. I think, and by all means, guys, you can tell me I'm full of shit if you disagree, but I think Jurgen Klopp has done it very well, but we're starting now to see the cracks and his frustrations come out, where some of the things he's doing and saying in the media is being, I kind of look at it now, I'm like, whatever, mate, you've got so much going your way. The master of it, I think, is Mourinho, where if the team's not doing well, he changes the focus to being on him, where he'll just say and do something random so that people start talking about what he said rather than playing performances. And I don't think Babbel got that portion of it. I don't think he quite understood when was the time to call out players and say that they need to be doing better and when is the best time to start trying to detract from the quality. You don't want to hear a manager saying about a playing group that he put together and a playing group that he's managing, that they're not good enough. Or even if they are talking about for Europe, like they might be good enough for the A-League, but it still creates that comparison that you do have a subpar league. And whose responsibility is that ultimately? His. He signed a lot of those players, or he agreed to sign a lot of those players, and he's the one coaching them every day. So I'm not sure why he drew attention to that. It was a very strange thing. But otherwise, fashion-wise, like a new elite level of hats and coats and stuff like that I will miss a tremendous amount, being a huge advocate for Winter Handsome in the league. But we will jump forward now to hopefully the more exciting portion, transfers in. We have mentioned a couple of them throughout the course of this episode already. But promising youngster Anthony Lesiotis has joined from Melbourne Victory. Graham Dorans joins from Dundee after a long career with the likes of Norwich, West Bromwich Albion and Rangers. Daniel Margush, a highly rated young keeper who is potentially going to be further brought up later when we talk about our lineups, comes across from Perth Glory where he couldn't get past Liam Reddy last season. Philip Kankar, a promising young player, has joined from NK Vartsky Dravolyak. I probably butchered the pronunciation, but we're just going to barrel on past that one. James Tracy has joined from Adelaide United in the past week. Ziggy Gordon has joined from Central Coast Mariners, and most recently Bernie Abini from the Newcastle Jets. Chrissy, I'll let you have the first crack at this one. Of the transfers in, which ones are you most excited about? Who are you looking forward to seeing in the league? Any unknowns in there that you think might surprise a few people?
I was really surprised with Bernie Abini. That was the transfer that I was surprised with. Even though everybody else saw it coming, I was just like, I can't believe they've actually pulled this one off. I was like, oh, okay, Bernie Abini, he's Sydney FC. We used to hate him. And I know we've signed a bunch of ex-Sydney FC players in the past, but he was definitely one of the players that I never would have expected to have an ounce of red and black in his body to go, okay, I'm going to sign for them. I do rate him. He's a great player. And a lot of people mentioned that they should have put in a couple of his goals against the Western Sydney Wanderers at derbies just to take the piss out of us. But look, I'm glad they didn't, because they were quite painful goals watching from our end. Looking forward to him putting them through to Sydney FC and scoring a couple for us. But yeah, I'm quite surprised with that one.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to address it because it came up in the Newcastle Jets season preview, and it's going to be talked about on this channel a little bit. But the nature of his release as well, we are not really going to get into that whole mental health discussion. If he's struggling with his mental health and needed a change of environment, we want to see him get the treatment and the help he needs. I think the fascinating part is he's now played under Carl Robinson at 3 separate clubs, Vancouver Whitecaps back in the day, Newcastle Jets, and now Western Sydney as well. So clearly there was something that was missing, and Carl Robinson knew where to get it, and that's why he went after Bernie Abini specifically. The nature of his release we will leave up to the professionals out there. We're not going to comment too much further. The other one as well, I think, who's very, very interesting is Ziggy Gordon, who was a player that I think everyone looked at as being one of the better players in that Central Coast lineup, but Central Coast didn't have a lot of positives. It's kind of easy to look like you're the best player in a team that is very, very poor. No, sorry, Mariners fans, you can savage me in the comment section below, that's fine. But it'll be interesting to see how he goes as well, because I'm not sure, with Tate Russell being there as like kind of that young bombing forward fullback that I think we're all enjoying watching for the Olyroos and Western Sydney, will Ziggy Gordon have a bit of a change of role? Will he move into a central defensive area where you've already got the likes of Dylan McGowan and Patrick Ziegler? I think that's a fascinating one. I'll be very interested to see where he lines up round one. But same question for yourself, Will. Of those transfers in, any that you're looking forward to seeing more from, or any that you're excited about ahead of the season?
Yeah, I'm actually really interested to see how Dorrans goes. I think looking at like a lot of his career history, he's had a very, very strong history. I mean, if I remember seeing the goal he scored against Manchester City when he was at West Brom, I think was an absolute beauty of a goal. And having that kind of dynamic box-to-box midfielder, I think, will be really, really useful for our team. And I'm just really excited to see another foreign midfielder in the squad and kind of balancing things out and hopefully providing the quality we need. The Ziggy Gordon one, like you said, is another interesting one. I think a lot of people were kind of criticising the club for kind of using a visa spot on him. But I think, to be honest, like at this stage of the season, with the way COVID is and the way we're going to bring in foreign players, I don't really know like where else we're going to get foreign players from other than like from within the league. I think a lot of teams have done really, really well to bring in foreign players, but it just adds more cover to a defence that really need improving from last season. So I'm keen to see him back there as well.
Yeah, the only side that's really made international, there's two, I take that back, MacArthur, but they didn't have any players, so that had to start somewhere, and Melbourne Victory. There's not really any other club that's made big international signings. Western United's picked up one player, Adelaide United's picked up one player, Melbourne City to date hasn't signed any. Actually, I take that back, we have a Japanese winger on loan. Sydney FC's made no signings at all, international or otherwise, so I think we are learning about what those challenges look like, and if you get... I think what they've done is that rather than trying to go out there and use like a global scouting network where it can be hit and miss, you've got known quantities. You know what James Trucy is. You know what Ziggy Gordon is. You know what Bernie Abini is going to offer. You very much know that they are of an A-League quality and can be good in this division. So you're not taking necessarily that risk portion. The big challenge, and I will call this out, is Graham Doran's coming across from Dundee. We've heard a lot of players, particularly players that come over kind of mid-30s. He's 34, I think, and he'll finish the season at 35. I could be wrong, correct me in the comments below. But it's a very different pitch structure in Australia where they're much harder underfoot. We've heard Michael Jakobsen, Ola Toivonen talk about how they struggled with injury recovery, playing on much harder surfaces, training on them every day, playing on them during matches. And coming across from Scotland, where I don't know if any of you have ever been to Scotland, but it's a marsh most of the time. You're probably ankle deep in most of the pitches that he trains and plays on each day. It wouldn't surprise me if we see him start to pick up in the early part of his career if he burns out too quickly, like calf injuries and hamstrings and thighs and all that sort of stuff, just dealing with the different surfaces. But I think we're starting to learn and we're starting to get a little bit better about how we manage those players and their workloads. So it'll be interesting to see how that one works out, because we've kind of starting to apply lessons that we've learned in previous off seasons about how those older players actually change and adapt and how they look moving forward. We are going to jump into our expected and preferred lineups. I do ask, after we talk about all of our players, for you guys to put your money where your mouth is and try and predict how the season's going to work. Of course, we know lineups are going to change week to week based on form, fitness, who you're playing, all that sort of great stuff. But the football manager in me, and I know, Will, you're going to love it as well. Chrissy, you can roll your eyes as much as possible. I love putting formations and stuff together. So this is always one of my favourite parts. All right, so first up, we're going to have a look through Will's dream team. I'll quickly run through this lineup. Will, you've gone with like a 5-2-3 shape or a 3-4-3, however you want to look at it, depending where you place the fullbacks. Margush in goal, Gordon, Ziegler and Morta Kudas as the back three. Russell as the right wing back, Georgievski as the left wing back, Troisi and Dorans in midfield, Abini, Mueller and Cox as the front three. Walk us through this lineup. Where do you think it's strongest? Where do you think it's weakest? Where do you think maybe it needs further improvement? Or where do you think it's going to be above and beyond the rest of the division?
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, we'd probably play four at the back, but judging from like our preseason lineups, I think this kind of variation is probably more likely. I think the reason I went for the three kind of forwards instead of the two strikers, I think it's super well rounded. I think Muller's definitely better out wide than he is in the middle, especially cutting inside. You have Cox playing centrally. I think there's no question about that. I guess it can vary to a three in the middle or two up front if we decide to move Muller centrally. I think also the reason I decided for the wingers out wide is because Carl Robinson kind of mentioned in a press conference that he wanted to play Kamau as an attacker and not a wingback. So I think the only way that kind of happens is if we get something like this. I guess the other thing that might be a bit eye-opening from this is I've gone for Tass over McGowan in that starting centre-back spot. But I think if McGowan steps up, he could return. This just off what I saw last season. But yeah, I think the only thing that I don't really like about this too much is the midfield and like the defensive side of it. I don't know how much Troisi and Dorrans are going to be really able to impact on the defensive end, and maybe there's a world where we kind of go back to a middle three and Bacchus comes back into the fold. But yeah, that's kind of what I've seen so far, and we'll see what happens come round one.
I mean, look, I mentioned this a couple of different times throughout the course of these, but like the thing that you want is you want to have questions over a team. Like you want to have players that you've left out so that you're showing not that you've got a clear 11. And this is future spoilers for people that haven't watched the other season previews. I think at the moment there's two sides that their squads are better than everybody else's. I won't tell you which ones. You guys can figure it out. Then there's a bottom four where like they can put together an 11, but they can't put together a good 15. And I think when you kind of look at Western Sydney squad, you want to have questions in different areas. You've left out Kwame Yeboah, you've left out Bacchus, as you've mentioned. Jordan O'Doherty isn't in there. McGowan's not in there. Janjetovic isn't in there. Like, there's a few different players that could chop and change very quickly, and that's what you want. You want to have players that are pushing to start in games. You want to have players that you can call upon if there are injuries or issues or whatever else. But Chrissy, of this lineup that you can see on screen, Will's team, any issues that you see, and he will get a chance to pick yours apart, so be as vicious or as gentle as you want to be. But anything that jumps out at you as being particularly different that you maybe either agree with or don't agree with?
I'm going to go with the defence, and I'm really, really happy with the 5 because we've had such issues with our defence over the seasons. Even before we returned to Bank West Stadium, we suffered. We suffered at ANZ and Spoilers, and we did suffer at the beginning of the season, returned to Bank West as well. As much as our season started off great, fell apart once again, and it did have to do a lot with our defence. So quite happy with the 5, and if we do end up playing with the 5 this season, I'll be quite happy to see it, and I won't have anything to complain about. other than that, yeah, I'm not sure quite. I'm quite happy with the rest of the team as well. My team is a little more a little more simple, and I think that has to do with not watching much of any football at all or having anything to do with the Wanderers in quite some time since COVID. So
No, but I think, like, to touch on your point, it's a tough part. Like, there's been a couple of different preseason lineups we've seen on Twitter, but it's always hard to tell exactly what they're doing. Like, you could take this same team and put it into like a 4-4-2 structure with a Beanie up top and Mueller in midfield, and even Ziggy Gordon playing on like the right hand side of a midfield four, and it's still the same players but a very different structure and a very different lineup. And one of the challenges that we've got is that Western Sydney, to their credit, have players that are quite versatile in a few different roles. We've seen, not at Western Sydney, but in previous clubs, Georgievski's played at the base of midfield before. We've seen Tracy played in wide areas. We've seen him played as an advanced playmaker number 10. We've seen him play deeper. Ziggy Gordon can be a right fullback, can be a centre back. So that's really what you want to see. You want to have that versatility in a playing group where it is a challenge looking at a team sheet. Okay, is everyone playing in the position that I think they're going to play, or is everyone playing in like their secondary position or somewhere else, like depending on how their preseason's gone? I think fascinating that you've left out your Boa, because I think he's kind of been earmarked as a player that's going to have a big season. He was at the A-League market, let's not say A-League marketing, the Foxtel Disaster marketing event earlier this season, where he spoke about his desire to become like that goal-scoring player and really repay Western Sydney's faith in him after giving him an opportunity coming back from Europe. It'll be interesting to see how that works out, but that's, again, a good problem to have. You want to have the likes of Bruce Kamau, Mueller, Abini, Traorisi, Yeboah looking to play in those final third areas and get into those wide positions, which is fantastic. Quick one for you though, Will. What was the first name that you put down on this team sheet?
First name that I put down this team sheet. I think it was Muller out wide. Like I'm super set on having him play out wide rather than in the middle. I think he just found it really difficult playing in that number 10 role because I think he's more natural, kind of cutting inside. And there were flashes when we did do that. Back on that like Yeboah point, I think if it wasn't for Abini, maybe Yeboah kind of finds his spot in this lineup, and I'm actually really looking forward to seeing him get back to that form that he had in, I think, the 2018-19 season when we first signed him. He looked really good at the back end of there. But it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're now going to jump into Chrissy's formation. Now, you've gone with a more conventional 4-3-3, which I'll be honest, I like the balance of a 4-3-3. I think it works well. And then the other portion as well is like a 4-3-3, it can become a 4-2-3-1 very quickly. It can become a 4-4-2 very quickly. It can become a 4-5-1 very quickly. So it has got potential different changes. This is just where I've put everybody's photos on the pitch. So it could change week to week. But you've gone with Janjetovic in goal over Margush, Tate and Georgievski at left back. Ziegler and McGowan as the central defensive partnership. Bacchus anchoring midfield behind Mueller and Tracy. Abini on the right wing, Yeboah on the left wing, and Cox up top. Mueller starting a bit deeper in midfield. No start for Dorans. And then also having McGowan come in for Mortakudis. Do you want to talk us... Oh, and then the big one, Janjetovic in goal. We haven't spoken too much about the goalkeeping scenario at Western Sydney at the moment. But yeah, talk us through this team. Where do you think some of the strengths lie? Where do you think there's potentially weaknesses? Where do you think we might see changes?
Well, especially a traditional setup as I've seen throughout the last couple of seasons. I wouldn't say I'm completely confident in it, but I have seen them play some really, really nice games in this formation. The reason I chose Janjetovic is because, yes, he was one of our starting keepers before. We had a lot of faith in him before his injury and his surgery and his shoulder. Due to the loss of Danny Lopa, he is, of course, the second goalkeeper that everybody sort of has faith in. I haven't seen too much of our other current goalkeepers that we have signed, as well as the youngsters that we also have on the sheet. So I went straight with somebody that I'd known on for a while. I've seen play not only at the Western Sydney Wanderers but at Sydney FC, and I sort of do have some confidence. The back line, these are all some of the players that have been traditionally on the sheet throughout previous seasons, and a couple of players that I, of course, have hope in, especially Tate Russell. I love the guy to death. I love everything that he's done for the Western Sydney Wanderers, and he's just played so well. He's never let us down. Of course, Bacchus, I didn't want to see the guy go at all because he has improved so much throughout the season, and he's really proved that he's matured with each game that he's played. Tracy, once again, a great player. He was amazing at Melbourne Victory. Of course, going to Adelaide, he didn't get much game time as much as he wanted on the field. So hopefully coming to the Western Sydney Wanderers, he's able to link up in the midfield with all these other key players. Muller, rate the guy. That's why I'm really, really glad that, of course, he signed back on for this season. He wasn't just an injury substitute. And the front three, of course, Yeboah, he's proved himself before. had a little bit of a rocky part of the season towards the end of last season, so a lot of people did lose a bit of hope in him. Thought he was more of a show pony rather than a player. But he has said, just like Will said, he said that the Foxtel failure season launch, he said he wanted to prove himself. So I do have hope that he'll actually take that on board, keep his word. With Simon Cox being our signing for last season, another promising player up front, and he does have a lot of enthusiasm for the Western Sydney Wanderers, so I'm happy to see him stay on board for this season. I'm looking forward to see what he has to show as well. And Abini, like I said, he's a great player. He's ruined our lives playing for Sydney FC heaps of times. Trust me, I've got trauma watching him play. But seeing him in red and black, I'm confident that he can do the same thing for us as he basically did against us in past seasons.
I was about to say he can't score against you anymore, but there's own goals. So, I know if I said that out loud and we recorded it, he'll head home round 1 for an own goal or something like that, just to make me look like an idiot. Look, I'll be honest, I think it wouldn't surprise me if we saw both Will's shape and structure and this shape and structure as well, because I think the thing that you've called out, Will, where that I don't think you're going to get a lot of defensive presence out of the likes of Dorans and Teresi. I think they're going to want to fulfill same positions as a more advanced playmaker, particularly both started their careers in wide areas and now have been brought back into midfield as their legs have gone. We haven't really talked about it, but it's a huge year for James Teresi. I mentioned it in the Adelaide United season preview earlier this week that really the worst thing that happened to him was scoring the winner in the Asian Cup final, because he started to, I think, believe too much of his own hype, where he thinks he's a player that should be on marquee wages, and he, didn't turn down a contract at Brighton because the money wasn't enough, and he nearly signed for teams in the Israeli Super League, and then nearly signed for Melbourne City, and then went back to Melbourne Victory and didn't do a whole lot other than kind of pout and strop, and then went to Adelaide. His dad's been in the paper every day this week bitching and moaning about the release from his contract. So I think there's quite a bit for him just to let your football do the talking now, prove that you are that quality, prove that you are that worth. I think if he can't get into this lineup and can't be a key part of the side, then people are really just, I think, going to write him off as being too much trouble and too difficult and not really worth the benefits for it. But you could say that for quite a few players in this lineup. Well, I've already mentioned it for McGowan. We've mentioned it for Keanu Bacchus. Yeboah have already mentioned for it as well, which is fascinating. Will, I'll give you the same chance that I gave Chrissy. You can tear this one apart as much as you like. What do you like about it? What do you think you'd change or we could see differently throughout the course of the season?
Yeah, the thing I like the most about it is the midfield three. And the reason is because we have so many young midfielders at our club. If there is one place that we do not need more young players, it is our midfield. There's Bacchus, there's O'Doherty, there's Grozos, there's Monge. There's so many young midfielders. And I think having a midfield three gives them kind of more opportunities to kind of get into the starting lineup. And I think that's what this formation allows us to do. I like having Bacchus back there as our number 6. I think hopefully he takes on that responsibility and he really kind of embraces it and flourishes under the pressure of having to fulfill, that number 6 role without having someone like Pierre Schwegler next to him. I think it's really good. I think having Yeboah, obviously, is a big season for him, and hopefully he kind of shines and gets back to the player that we know he could be. But other than that, I like it. The Janjetovic thing is maybe one thing I may not agree with so much, but I can understand it for sure. And I think it's great that we've got 2 really good competitive keepers competing for that starting spot. I think it's only going to bring about positive things for both players' development. Yeah,
I think the best compliment you give a player is where fans are unhappy to see him leave a particular club. And obviously there's about 57 different Sydney FC fans and about 15 Adelaide fans in the reserve team, so we hear from them quite a bit, but quite a few of them were saying that Margush is a quality keeper that just hasn't really had a chance because first he was behind Eugene Galekovic at Adelaide, then he was behind Liam Reddy at Perth. He just hasn't really had that chance. He's only made 7 A-League appearances at time of recording at least. So you've kind of got an unknown quantity that's highly rated by fan groups, and then you've got a known quantity where Janjetovic can be good, but you also know he can be a goddamn liability, because if you search his name in a gift search, it's not positive stuff that comes up. So, it's a real challenge. We only deal with cold hard facts here at the reserve team, of course, but I will get some speculation from you guys. There is a rumour, and Chrissy, I'm pretty sure I know your answer already, that potentially there's a trade offering going on for Georgievski and Mark Burgiddy at Central Coast, which has been swirling around Reddit and Twitter throughout the course of the week. We never know how true these things are. I think Georgievski started the last 2 friendlies, which is probably a sign that he does have a place in the team. But given the challenges that you guys have both called out at the goalkeeper position, would you take that swap? Chrissy, I know he's Macedonian, he's your boy. I get it if you've got to stick with your brand, but would you take that trade, an experienced defender in Georgievski, for someone like Birigidi, who is still a young keeper that we know is a very high quality?
I'll fight anybody who wants to take Georgievski. No, but I do. You have a good point there. He hasn't been able to shine as much as we've seen him in the past, especially when he played for Melbourne Victory and for a good half of the season that he played for Newcastle Jets. So it's been sad that we haven't been able to see him to his full potential, because I know what the guy is capable of. He's an amazing defender. But look, if he's not giving us what we need to make sure that we're in the top 4, then if a trade is needed, a trade is needed. At the same time, if he's not getting that game time, he's losing his ability to be a player. So if he can go get game time somewhere else and keep up the amazing skill that he has and the agility that he has, and so be it.
I think Filip Kankar, who's come in from the Croatian side, is a young left back option. And I've forgotten his name, and by all means you guys can correct me, but the ex-ball boy who played left back a few different times last season, a young player on a scholarship contract. Yeah, thank you. They're both options on that left-hand side that are naturally left-footed players. I think this lineup, as we're looking at it, and I'm only just realising this now, there's only one left-sided player in James Tracy that I'm aware of in that lineup. Everybody else is right-footed, which makes it a little bit one-dimensional in the width. Will, same question to you. Would you take that trade, knowing that there is potentially young players looking to play in that left-back spot that we may see?
I mean, I wouldn't take the trade, but for like a slightly different reason. I think having Georgievski, someone who's kind of been played at different clubs over his career, has played in the A-League for a number of seasons. Having someone like that in your team, and I said this about Duke, having someone like that to kind of give the youngsters that kind of guidance, especially players like Wilmering and Kankar, who are looking to kind of build and just getting their kind of first steps into the league. Having someone like that ahead of them, even if Georgievski's not playing every game, having someone like him within the club as that leadership presence, I think is going to be super, super valuable. And also, I think hopefully he can. We know he's good defensively, but hopefully going forward he kind of gives us a bit more, and we know what he's capable of. We've seen it before. And in terms of bringing another goalkeeper to the squad as well, I think it kind of is a bit of an imbalance, and for that reason I probably wouldn't take the trade.
Yeah, I mean, Birigidi's experience at the moment is picking the ball up out of his own net. Not entirely his fault being at the Mariners, but, never the mindset that you want a goalkeeper in throughout the course of that period. But fascinating stuff to see. I think Wilmering's got 4.5-star potential on Football Manager, so you've got to get him out on the pitch if he's going to make use of it. But that's my bias coming back into it. But look, I think the best thing that I can say, and I've already mentioned it, is that you guys have done very different shapes and very different lineups, and neither of them look significantly weaker than the other. It's good to have that depth of field. It's good to have that versatility in the way that you guys are going to play. There will be these two formations, and I'm sure 100 other ones at different stages in games throughout the course of this year. We know that, but always fun and a good little task. I think you both did a fantastic job. We will jump back into our regular screen and start firing through our last items. And the first one that I want to run through with you guys, we've mentioned it a couple of times already, but the current manager and assistant coach setup. You've got Carl Robinson, manager, moving across from Newcastle Jets this off-season. Good to see him getting a full pre-season program with the new squad. Kenny Miller has come across as well as his assistant, long-time youth league coach and first-team coach Labino Hinalidi, also there as an assistant coach. And Italian international Davide Del Giovine is goalkeeping coach for the upcoming season. What are your thoughts on that group? What were some of your thoughts initially as fans once you saw that Robinson appointment come through? Will, I'll let you have the first crack at this one, mate.
I mean, I think it's a good setup. I'm actually glad we kept Labi Halidi in there. Having him, I think I don't know too much about what the behind-the-scenes stuff he kind of does, but I think having someone like that who was part of that, early period of the club, having someone to kind of has that experience of when the club was at its great stage, having him as a mentor to the younger players will be really, really useful. Obviously, a lot of has been said about Carl. I think Kenny Miller as well. A lot of people have kind of I think he did an interview where he just spoke about how much he loves working under Carl, and having that great relationship with coach and assistant is also something that's really, really positive. I'm looking forward to seeing how they shape up and how they develop this group of players in the season. Yeah,
fascinating. I actually hadn't heard that about Kenny Miller. So, interesting to see that he's got assistants happy to work underneath him and like working with him. And then we've seen it with Bernie Abini playing group as well. So, yeah, fascinating comparison to run there. And Labino Halidi, of course, started both legs of the Champions League final. He's got a job for life as far as Western Sydney is concerned, you would think. But Chrissy, what are your thoughts as well? What did you feel when you heard about the initial appointment?
The initial appointment, I knew that half of Newcastle wanted to kill me. So that was horrible. look, I'm a former Jets supporter before the Western Sydney Wanderers, so I do have a little bit of a loyalty to the Jets. In a way, to see that coaching staff come across, I'm like, yes, because it is a class coaching staff. As for Davide, who is the goalkeeper coach at the current moment, I've seen him do work with the Western Sydney Wanderers women's side, and he's done an amazing job with Jada Wyman and the likes of many other W League goalkeepers who have come across to sign for the Western Sydney Wanderers. So I think he's going to be great for the goalkeepers that we currently have signed, especially if we are to see any return of veteran Jedic on the field. So I am confident that the goalkeepers for this season will be trained well and taken care of well. Yeah, I'm quite confident with the coaching staff that we have, especially the goalkeeping coach.
I won't drag you into having to talk about Jaden Wyman's off-season move across town, but that will be future content for another week, I'm absolutely sure. The active support, we've mentioned it. It is fantastic. For the brief criticisms that I've given, that's just me giving my devil's advocate approach to it. But the Red and Black Brock, obviously, I think one of the biggest and best active supports in the division. They've now got safe standing as well, which is only going to increase their presence and atmosphere at games. What I'm going to ask you two guys to do, you've both mentioned sneaking in at a young age to that environment and being there ever since. If you're going to try and pitch someone to come down to a Western Sydney game, it may not necessarily be immediately into active support, but just to check out the environment, the atmosphere that maybe hasn't been to a game before or is sitting on the fence about getting down to matches this season. How would you pitch that to them? How would you try and get them through the gate to watch a match? Chrissy, I'll let you have the first crack at this one.
I mean, I've got to think of a way to do it without scaring them.
Scare them as much as you want, because there's an intensity level that, some people I think appreciate quite a bit. And then there's also, we've already mentioned it, the match day experience portion, which is, football, and particularly Western Sydney football, is different and unique to anything else in Australia. So yeah, be as aggressive as you want. Don't light a flare in your living room, but do as much as you can.
Look, I've always started off with telling them about how much football has made me feel at home, and how much the Western Sydney Wanderers have made me feel like I've found the home. So I do always give them the backstory of who I supported before the Western Sydney Wanderers, and then tell them how this club on itself has actually made me feel like I've found where I finally belong after years and years of searching. And I was like, and I just go along the lines of that and say, well, if you've ever thought about supporting a football club, but why not the Western Sydney Wanderers? And then from there, I just take the pitch and I say, well, come to this game with me. I'll be your bodyguard. I'll be your tour guide, and it's worked out. I've actually converted a couple fans who used to think, maybe Sydney FC is the team for me, and I've actually gotten them to join me in the RBB, and they've never looked back since.
Yeah, I mean, little Balkan Baller Thunder is probably the best bodyguard you could get in any active support environment across the league, so that's a hard offer to turn down. But same question as well for yourself, Will. What would you try and do to market the A-League experience and the active support experience?
I'll probably just describe my match day experience on a weekend from start to end. It starts with the march. You start at the pub. You're just seeing everyone, who stands around you. You see the same people every week. And over the RBB started running the fundraiser. I think it was for the bushfires. Having that, and that kind of really galvanized the community together. And there's been a bunch of initiatives like that in the past. That's just the most recent one. And that is the best kind of way I can showcase how strong this group is and how everyone's willing to, fight for each other, happy to, support each other when we need it. And that kind of sense of community is something that I've kind of really tapped into. I think a lot of people that I've brought in with me on individual games have also kind of noticed as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned it already and kind of gushed over the initial community interaction and the club actually being a proper representation of the Western Sydney region. It's very easily, and it happens a lot in the A-League, unfortunately, where too many marketing people get involved and they worry too much about, how are we going to present this to businesses and sponsors and whatever else. But the approach that Western Sydney's taken, and we're definitely seeing them reaping the rewards with a new stadium and new training facilities and stuff, is they've gone with that community first approach and being a representation of that. I think there's a lot of standards that Western Sydney set that we're now seeing implemented by the likes of Western United and MacArthur and whoever else in how they engage the local community, but then at the same time setting different standards for active support and stuff like that, and different fan groups. How they measure themselves is against the Red and Black Block at the moment. There isn't really any other experience with that. I'm sure the Cove's going to absolutely tear me apart on Twitter, but bring it on, that's fine. But yeah, I think as both of you guys have said, if you give it a chance and you get through that door, that's the biggest step and that's the biggest hurdle. You very rarely hear about anybody going to a match and having a poor match day experience, whether that's getting, hot and heavy in amongst the block or even just watching from, the stadium itself. It is a good family experience, seeing that colour and seeing that vibrancy there. Round 1 fixture for you guys, Macarthur on Sunday the 27th of December. Fingers crossed it all goes ahead. Sydney, of course, chaos at the moment. Worst case scenario, just come down here, we'll host it in my backyard or something like that. But it is kicking off the season, 6:30, so you guys are setting a bit of a standard with the first home fixture this year. It'll be great to see Bankwest, hopefully, full of fans and full of black and red colours. Season predictions and expectations. What do you guys think is an acceptable pass mark for Western Sydney this season to make it not necessarily look like you're going to be immediately winning titles or anything like that, but where do you think would be a good positive step forward for the season ahead? Will, I'll let you have the first crack at this one, mate. What do you think is the best, or what is your prediction first, and what do you think is a good pass mark for the year?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with me when I say that top 6 is definitely the expectation this year, as it probably is for most clubs. This is a very, very competitive league this year. There are a lot of teams that have improved, and a lot of teams have gotten a lot better. So I think, in a regular season, in a normal season, maybe a couple of years ago, I maybe would have predicted this team to go a bit higher. But I think, potentially getting that kind of low final spot around 5th or 6th is probably like a good pass mark for this season for sure. And maybe, I guess at the very least, if we don't finish in the finals, kind of maybe shifting towards giving the youth a bit more of a chance towards the end once it kind of seems like that's not going to be a possibility. Something that I don't think we really did towards the end. I think we still kind of embraced, didn't embrace the youth towards the end of the season. But I think definitely pass mark is top 6 this season. I think a lot of people are expecting that. The club's been very, very ambitious with its signings. It's gone after players on contracts, kind of stirring the waters a bit. And I think for that reason, that's going to be the expectation. Yeah,
and I mean, the challenge at the moment is that the expectation, I think, across the league is that the two initial Melbourne sides, I shouldn't say that anymore because Western United are a part of the league and we want them to do well if they're part of the league, and then also Macarthur joining. There's an expectation that those two more established Melbourne teams and the two more established Sydney teams should be up towards the top of the division. Macarthur's, I think, recruitment, the same way that I've already mentioned, Sydney FC was galvanised by Western Sydney joining. They really got their shit together in terms of a football department, and arguably it spurred them on to have their greatest period of success or their most consistent period of success. It's the same challenge now for Western Sydney with Macarthur joining. And they've obviously, I think, done a very good job with their recruitment. And it's an additional challenge in different regions and how that split's going to work in the Sydney area. But the big challenge, of course, will be how do you guys start to be the yardstick, and they're the new boys in town. If they finish above you this year, the challenges start to become a little bit more. They're obviously working on a long-term project as well. But Chrissy, same question for you. Where do you think the team will finish this season? Where do you think would be an acceptable pass mark? Is finals, as Will said, the kind of where you'd expect them to be?
With the team that we have put together in the last 2 weeks, I really am expecting them to be in the top 4, if not top 6. So I'm expecting quite a lot from them this season, especially with the way that they've spoken themselves up and said that we've signed these players for a reason, specifically because we want to be in finals. So I expect them to be in the finals. I also expect them to win against teams such as Macarthur as well as Sydney FC. This first game, I know it's the first game of the season, round 1, but if this is going to show us where we're at. And if we don't win against Macarthur, then not only will we look like a laughing stock, it will also put a lot of fans out again. And like I said before earlier on in the podcast, Robinson needs to gain the trust of the fans, especially the active support. So if we lose against our new rivals, especially a club which has taken a few of our ex-players along to their side of town, it's going to upset a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating the way that you mentioned that, and I could go on around here for an hour, but I hate the way that the A-League fixturing always tends to put derbies and big fixtures in round 1, because the reality is we don't need them then. We should all be excited enough about the new season starting that we just want to go and see our team and see a match. The fact that we've got a grand final replay this weekend doesn't really help Sydney FC or Melbourne City, and as you've mentioned, the big one is Western Sydney. The best thing that could happen to them, and the best thing that could also happen to Macarthur, is that they both get a win this week. So I'm sure they'd both rather be playing Newcastle and Central Coast to start their seasons right and build that momentum over time. Sorry, Newcastle and Central Coast fans, but deal with the reality of your situation. The weird thing is that both, if this comes out as like a 0-0 draw or a defeat for either side, it is going to deflate that supporter group, and that's not really. It's not a smart, I think, footballing decision. It's not a smart business decision, other than, I'm sure, Foxtel pulling the strings, wanting to have a big match round 1 to open the season, which is fingers crossed, my Christmas wish that we get a better TV rights deal, or that we get some sort of digital distribution deal or something like that moving forward where it becomes less traction based. But yeah, I think as you've mentioned, it's an excellent point that we haven't really discussed or talked about building that momentum this season. But look, I think they've got the squad to play finals. I think when you do a comparative analysis, and full disclosure, we haven't mentioned this at all. If we'd had done this preview a week ago, 2 weeks ago, probably a little bit different a discussion, because Tracy, Gordon, Abini weren't in that squad, and that's a little bit different. But if you do a comparison, there is definitely tiers starting to appear in the division itself. I think there's top 2 that I've already mentioned. There's a bottom 4, which I think is quite clear, and then there's a middle group. And if Western Sydney can answer these questions positively, if the people we've talked about like Yeboah and McGowan and Bacchus have good seasons, I don't see any reason why you couldn't get top 4 football and 6 as a minimum type thing. But if they don't get it wrong, if Carl Robinson takes a little bit longer to ingratiate his style of play, and if, as we've already mentioned, the board isn't supporting him all the way through that project, it could be a challenge again. But again, I think the individual quality of the players that are out there, I think the smart off-season moves and getting proven, known A-League quantities into the league, or into the side, is also the right direction, and I think a massive step forwards. That does unfortunately bring us to the end. I'm sure if we wanted to, we probably could have gone and talked for another hour and a half about all things red and black. But we do, want to try and keep these to a manageable quantity for everybody watching on YouTube or listening along on Spotify with us. Thank you both so much for joining me. I do appreciate you guys both coming on. Fantastic to get you both on the channel for the first time. Hopefully we'll see more of you in the next few weeks. Will, if people want to check out more of your content, your social media, hit up one of your afternoon Twitch streams, something like that, where is the best place to find you?
You can hop on the Twitter, the @ on the screen @constant_, or you can follow the Twitch directly, twitch.tv/constant_. I stream Football Manager and mostly rant about the Wanderers in the background. So that doesn't limit me to just an hour and a half. It gives me 4 hours a day, gives me three or 4 days a week. That's where you can find me. And yeah, it's been really great on here. I'm looking forward to hopefully doing more of these in the future.
Mate, if you're looking forward to the season, wait until we get that reserve team network save going. I'll absolutely destroy you each and every week live on Twitch. Chrissy, same question for yourself. Obviously, you are the elite of soccer Twitter as far as I'm concerned, and do some fantastic stuff with the Ladies League and reserve team. If people want to see more of you, where should they best go and check out your socials?
Of course, you can find me on Twitter or on the Ladies League page mostly. Rosa likes to post heaps and heaps of memes of me. So you find us at Ladies A League on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter as well, so I'm not too far away. It's at Ciacheska. Have fun spelling that last name and also pronouncing it. But yeah, if you find me, you find me. And if you do, you'll have a good laugh. At the same time, you'll probably join in with yelling about the Wanderers as soon as kickoff starts on the 27th. So
I can't believe I'm only realising this in the outro, but Georgievski, Macedonian backdrop of Western Sydney social media. You are our Macedonian backdrop for all of our social media stuff. Like, there's something in the water as far as the Balkans are concerned. But for any white people, we will put links in the description below to try and find those Twitter handles and Twitch links and all that sort of stuff. And you can also go and check out the reserveteam.com.au for all news around the A-League and W League season launches, everything in and around Australian and New Zealand football. If you want to help support this channel a little bit more, you can drop a like on this video. It does help it get higher in YouTube search results when people look for Australian and New Zealand football content. You can also subscribe to the channel to be kept up to date on all of our future videos, including our remaining season previews. We've got a whole bunch of great stuff coming up in the build up to the season starting, and then fantastic shows coming all the way through the A-League and W League seasons as well. But from myself, from Chrissy, from Will, we just appreciate you guys watching. That's the part that means most to us. As always, I've been Shaun, this has been the Reserve Team, and we'll see you all again next time.